Hello, my name is Jeremy Larance, and I'm the chair of the Department of Humanities at West Liberty University. And today I'm going to give you a little bit of a whirlwind, brief overview of the history of co-requisite support and composition at West Liberty University. Prior to 2013, this is what our developmental composition looked like at West Liberty, probably pretty similar to what a lot of schools look like, especially if they have not implemented something like CoRec. We have a 0 credit class and then a regular 3-hour credit class that students could take once they pass the 0 credit class. Now, for many years, the pass rates for 075 were around 75%. Again, pretty typical. And then of those students, 53% went on to pass English 101, which meant that really overall, students who started in 075, we had a pass rate of about 40%. Not great, but unfortunately, probably not that uncommon. In 2013, the West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission essentially mandated that all four-year schools get rid of 0 credit remedial courses and instead implement some form of co-requisite support. I won't read that whole statute there to you, but we knew that we had to first get rid of 075, and we had to come up with some way of giving students supplemental support. And to do that kind of on the fly at the beginning, we used our special topics course, English 278. So first and foremost, we put those students into a regular English 101 class. We tried to use the mainstreaming method there. About half the traditional students and half the class would be students who would have previously taken 075. And half, we're talking probably 10, 11, 10, 10, as much as we could in terms of students. And then those students would take English 278, a special topics course, which was used to supplement the instruction for those students. It was taken pass-fail. There were some inherent problems with that. It was led by trained students, which again, there's some problems with that as well, although we had a great group of students that year, and that really helped. And the students were paid for through a grant. And part of the problem was there were some logistical issues with scheduling, but also we lost that grant money. We only had that money for a year, so we had to move on to something else. We did see some success, which I'll talk about here in a second. Our first version of just making it one class, we just simply made English 101 a 3 to 5 hour credit class. We went through the curriculum committee and changed that. So there were 5-hour versions of English 101. These classes were taught by adjuncts and faculty, and all classes were again mainstreamed, typically 11 students in the 3-hour version and 10 students in the 5-hour. And then we tried as much as possible to have the instructor's supplemental hours overlap. What I mean by that, and this is going to get a little confusing, I realize that, but Teacher X, for example, if he or she was teaching 2 5-hour classes, he was actually technically signed up for 4 classes. So for every 5-hour class, there was also a 3-hour class with the enrollment cap of each half the number of what a typical comp class would be. The idea being that that would equal one composition class and that they would meet at the same times. So English 101 and English 61 would meet at one time, and English 1022 and English 10162 would meet at one time for the equivalent of 2 classes. And then the students who were in the class for supplemental support would then come back for 2 additional hours each week. And we would try as much as possible to schedule those at the same time to kind of help out the teachers with their scheduling. So again, it's complicated. I get that. That's kind of the point. We'll get back to that a little bit later. In 2016-17, we had to deal with some issues that came up as a result of the Affordable Care Act. Long story short, at West Liberty University, we could no longer give adjuncts more than 9 hours, which is great in theory, but for us, it meant that we could no longer give an adjunct 2 5-hour courses in one semester. So we had to try to figure out ways of using our faculty members and working those 5-hour classes into their normal teaching load. Now, given that teachers typically at West Liberty teach 12 hours a semester, and for the English faculty, that typically means 2 composition courses, we quickly realized that working a 5-hour class into a normal teaching load just would not work. you would either have too few hours, so, which would not make the administrators happy, or you'd have too many hours, which would not make the faculty member happy. So we came up with what we thought was a decent solution. Again, it's very complicated when you first look at it. I fully own up to that. But what happened was we said, okay, you can choose option A or option B. If you choose option A, you will go over 12 hours in the fall, but you'll go under in the spring, so you'll equal 24 for the year. So, and again, you can see the math there. And then for option B, you would flip it, do just the opposite. The problem was that no matter how we spread those options out, we ended up having too many 5-hour classes needed in the fall, in the spring. And we just didn't need to schedule that many 5-hour classes in the spring. So this only works if you have those classes going both semester. So like I said, it is very confusing. I fully acknowledge that. But just to kind of give you a quick recap, from 13 to 14, we primarily used this 2-hour supplemental course that was taught by students for no credit, but it was required to pass the course. And then in 2015-16, we used mostly adjuncts to teach 5-hour courses, but then we had to switch to faculty members in 2016 using that complicated scheduling that I showed you earlier. And I would also like to point out that in 2016, due to a scheduling problem, we had to, for the first time, offer a class that was all co-rec, meaning every student in the class was in a 5-hour version of English 101. Not to give away my big ending here, but we didn't see much of a difference. And so that was easier to schedule. So we actually went that route for most of 2017. And I'll come back to that here in a second. Now, what I want to point out is that really this is what it comes down to. How successful were the co-requisite programs, initiatives at West Liberty? Pretty darn successful when you look at how the numbers used to be. Typically, like I said before, we had about a 40% pass rate of students who started in English 075 who ended up then passing English 101, compared to an average of about 78% once we went to co-rec. Because once you pass the co-rec version of 101, you are passing English 101. So almost double. Now, what I'd like to point out, and again, given all the confusing slides I just showed you, we never did it the same way really 2 years in a row. But what you'll see is the numbers pretty much stay the same. Which again, my big takeaway, now granted, our numbers are not huge at West Liberty in terms of number of students, but my big takeaway here is that to a great extent, it probably doesn't matter what you do. Just do something. You may have to get creative schedule-wise, you may have to get creative hour-wise, but if you give the students co-rec support, it works. It's that simple, I think. Now, I also wanted to show you that when I look back at the numbers in terms of how the students fared in classes that were split, mainstreamed, and how students fared in classes that were all co-requisite, I think you'll see that to a certain degree, it looks like the students who were in the all co-requisite classes actually did a little better percentage-wise in terms of passing. Now, again, that's a very small sample size, so I'm not going to go as far as to say that's absolutely the way you should go. But once again, I think the key here is that do something. To a certain extent, maybe we overthink it in terms of how we give the support, how we schedule that support. They do better, no matter what we did at West Liberty. I'm not saying we could do no wrong. We worked very hard in terms of trying to give our students a great supplemental co-requisite class. But really, no matter what we did, it was definitely better than what we had done before, especially when you compare it to those numbers from the previous years. Now, I also want to point out real quickly, I think this is maybe the biggest factor that I'm really proud of. Of the students who passed the co-requisite version of English 101, 84% of those students have gone on to pass English 102, the second level in our composition program and general studies at West Liberty. To me, that's great, because 102, it's often a different instructor, there are different objectives, but they're doing really well. And in fact, 84% is right at about the average of the pass rate of the typical student. So that's where I'm most proud of our work at West Liberty. So please contact me if you have any questions. I'll be happy to give you some more details about the specifics and logistics of what we did. But hopefully, my biggest takeaway here is that Corequisite does work, and I strongly encourage you, if you haven't already, to try to figure out how you could work this out at your own school. Thank you.